No one in Umudiala village ever imagined that silence could be shattered by a single slap. The sun hung low that evening, swollen and red, as if it too was holding its breath. Women hurried home from the stream with calabashes balanced on their heads. Children chased each other barefoot across the dusty square, and the elders gathered beneath the ancient ukpukpa tree, where judgment had been passed for generations. It was a day like any other, until Adanna, the daughter of Chief Okorie, raised her hand. Chief Okorie was not just a father, he was the spine of the village. His words settled disputes, his gaze commanded obedience, and his shadow alone could quiet a quarrel. He was known as a man who feared the ancestors and enforced tradition without mercy. From childhood, Adanna had been taught to bow her head in his presence, to speak only when spoken to, and never, never to question him publicly. Yet on that evening, with the village square full and the elders watching, Adanna did the unthinkable. She slapped her father. The sound cracked through the air like a thunderclap. It echoed against mud walls and thatched roofs, ricocheted through the marketplace, and froze every living thing in place. A goat bleated sharply and broke loose from its rope. A baby stopped crying mid-breath. Even the wind seemed to retreat. Adanna stood rigid, her chest heaving, her palms still raised as if she too could not believe what it had done. Her eyes burned, not with madness, but with a pain so deep it looked ancient. The slap was not born of anger alone, it carried years of swallowed words, nights of silent tears, and a truth that had fermented in darkness. Chief Okorie staggered back a step. That alone shocked the village more than the slap itself. No one had ever seen the chief stumble, not in battle, not in argument, not even in old age. His eyes widened, not in rage, but in something far more unsettling: fear. His lips trembled as if he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. You dare?" one of the elders whispered, rising unsteadily to his feet. Women clutched their wrappers tighter. Some turned away, already mourning Adanna's fate. In Umudiala, a daughter who raised her hand against her father invited death, exile, or worse, the curse of the ancestors. Adanna finally spoke, her voice calm but sharp, slicing through the murmurs. "I did not slap you as my father," she said. "I slapped you as a liar." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chief Okorie found his voice then, and it came out hoarse. "You will kneel. Kneel now and beg before the spirits hear this madness." But Adanna did not kneel. Instead, she took a step back and lifted her chin. "Let the spirits hear," she said. "They have been watching longer than you think." The sky darkened suddenly, clouds rolling in from nowhere. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Somewhere beyond the village, thunder growled, not loud, but deliberate. Old Mama Nineka, the blind seer who had not spoken in years, let out a long, trembling sigh. "The earth has been struck," she murmured, "and it remembers." As the first drop of rain hit the dust, Adanna turned away from her father and walked into the gathering storm, leaving behind a village that had just witnessed the beginning of something far more dangerous than disobedience. That night, Umudiala would not sleep, because a slap had been delivered, but a curse had been awakened. Rain fell that night in a way Umudiala had not known for decades. It did not cleanse the earth gently, it beat it as though the sky itself was angry. Roofs leaked, fires died, and the paths that led into the village dissolved into thick, sucking mud. Yet even as the storm raged, it was not the rain that kept people awake. It was fear. In every compound, whispers replaced sleep. "Did you see her eyes? She was not afraid. Chief Okorie will not let this pass. But what if the ancestors were watching?" Adanna walked alone through the darkness, her feet soaked, her wrapper clinging to her legs. She did not run, though every instinct urged her to. She knew the paths of Umudiala better than anyone. She had memorized them during the years she spent returning late from the stream, from the farm, from places she never spoke of. Tonight, however, the paths felt different, heavier, as if the earth itself resisted her steps. Behind her, in Chief Okurie's compound, chaos reigned. The chief sat on a low stool, staring at his trembling hands. The sting on his cheek had faded, but something far worse burned beneath his skin. It was not pain, it was exposure. For the first time in his life, he felt seen. "Call the elders," he said at last. "Call them now." By the time the council gathered under the ukpukpat tree, the rain had slowed to a cold drizzle. Lightning flashed without thunder, illuminating the elders' faces in pale bursts. They sat in a tight circle, their expressions grim. "This is no ordinary offense," Elder Chibuzo said. "A daughter struck her father before witnesses. The land has heard." "And answered," another elder added quietly. At that moment, a sharp cry cut through the rain. A young boy stumbled into the circle, sobbing uncontrollably. "The river!" he gasped. "The river has turned dark! The fish are floating!" Silence fell. The Idemili River was sacred. It fed the farms, baptized newborns, and carried prayers to the ancestors. For it to turn dark was an omen spoken of in old stories, stories elders preferred to forget. Old Mama Naneka was led forward, her milky eyes lifted to the sky. She tapped her staff against the ground 3 times. "The ancestors are restless," she said. "A hidden abomination has been struck open. Blood might not have spilled, but truth has." All eyes turned to Chief Okurie. His jaw tightened. "This is about discipline," he said, "nothing more." Mama Naneka shook her head slowly. "If it were only discipline, the earth would be silent, but the earth is speaking." Far from the council, Adanna reached the edge of the forest. She stopped beneath a towering iroko tree, the rain dripping from its leaves like whispered warnings. Her strength finally gave way, and she sank to her knees. "I did not mean to wake you yet," she whispered into the darkness, "but I could not carry it alone any more." The wind surged suddenly, circling her like unseen arms, and somewhere deep within the forest, something ancient opened its eyes. The forest was never silent, not truly. Even on calm nights it breathed. Leaves whispered secrets, insects hummed ancestral songs, and roots creaked beneath the soil like old bones shifting. But on that night, as Adanna knelt beneath the iroko tree, the forest held a different kind of attention. It was listening. The wind moved in slow circles around her, lifting strands of her braided hair and brushing against her skin with a familiarity that sent shivers down her spine. Adanna closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling unevenly. "I kept quiet," she whispered, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. "I obeyed, I endured, but silence has become poison." Memories surged forward, memories she had buried so deep that even she sometimes doubted their reality. She was 15 when it happened. The night had been heavy with heat, the moon swollen and yellow. Her mother had been ill, groaning softly in the inner room, while Chief Okurie returned late from a council meeting, smelling of palm wine and authority. He called Adanna into his obi, his voice calm, commanding. She obeyed without question. That was the night her childhood ended. Adanna's fists clenched as the memory tightened around her throat. She had screamed then, but the walls were thick, and respect for a chief was thicker. In Umudiala, a father's word outweighed a daughter's tears. When she told no one, the village slept peacefully, unaware that a crime had been committed beneath its roofs. "I swallowed it," she whispered now, tears streaking her face. "I swallowed you, too." A sudden crack split the air. The Iroquo's trunk shuddered, its leaves thrashing wildly, though no storm raged. Adanna looked up, fear and defiance warring in her eyes. "Why now?" she asked. "Why did you wait?" The forest answered, not with words, but with sensation. A deep pressure settled on her chest, not painful, but heavy, ancient. Images flooded her mind, generations of women, heads bowed, children born of silence, rivers darkened by unspoken sins. This was not her burden alone. Back in the village, Chief Okorie paced his compound like a trapped
not
animal.
loud, not soft, rose from everywhere at once. "Speak, child of pain, or the land will speak for you." Adanna lifted her head, her tears drying. "I will speak," she said, "even if it burns us all." And in Umudiala, the ancestors began to prepare for judgment. The next morning, Umudiala woke to a quiet that felt unnatural. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, damp with the smell of earth and something older, something waiting. Children lingered in their compounds, hesitant to run and play. Women murmured prayers over their cooking fires, and men gathered in small groups, casting anxious glances toward the Idemili River. By the time the sun rose, the entire village had assembled along the riverbank. Mothers clutched their youngest, elders leaned heavily on carved staffs, and fishermen stared in disbelief. The river that had always gleamed like polished silver in the morning sun was now a deep, inky black. Fish floated lifelessly, their eyes wide with unspoken warning. Even the birds seemed hesitant, perching silently on the mangled reeds along the bank. Chief Okorie arrived, his usual aura of control crumbling as he surveyed the scene. His fine robes, usually pristine, were damp and clinging to his frame, and his face was pale, drawn tight with fear. He pushed through the crowd, raising his hands in command, but the villagers did not move. "What has happened here?" he demanded, his voice trembling. An elder stepped forward, shaking. "The river, it is cursed. It carries no life." "Cursed," Okorie scoffed, but his words had no conviction. Even he felt the oppressive weight that seemed to hang in the air, pressing at his chest like a living thing. From the far side of the riverbank, Adanna appeared. She moved quietly, yet the crowd parted instinctively, as if the land itself recognized her presence. Her wrapper was still damp, clinging to her legs, and her eyes glimmered with a strange, unwavering determination. She raised her hands, and even before she spoke, the villagers felt it, a shift in the wind, a quiet trembling in the soil beneath their feet. "The river has turned black because the truth has been silenced for too long," Adanna said, her voice carrying over the stunned crowd. "The lies, the betrayals, the things hidden behind doors, they have poisoned the land. My father's sins are not mine alone, but they fall on all of us until they are revealed." Murmurs erupted. Some mothers pulled their children close, others whispered fervent prayers. Chief Okorie's jaw tightened, his hands trembling despite his effort to look composed. He took a step toward her. "You dare," but Adanna cut him off. "I dare because silence kills, and today it will end." A sudden wind whipped along the riverbank, scattering water and leaves. The river, black as ink, rippled unnaturally. In that moment, the villagers understood this was not just punishment, it was a warning. Old Mama Neka, who had followed silently to the river, stepped forward. Her voice was hoarse, trembling with age, yet sharp. "The ancestors have stirred. The land calls for truth. If the silence continues, the river will not be the only thing that dies." The villagers fell into uneasy silence. Even Chief Okiri could not find words. His daughter, the one he had sought to control, now stood as the voice of the ancestors. And for the first time in his life, he feared her, not for the slap, but for the power she had awakened. The sun had barely risen when whispers began to travel through Umudiala like wildfire. The river's blackened waters were no longer just a sight, they were a message, a reminder that the village's deepest secrets were clawing their way to the surface. Farmers abandoned their fields, traders left their stalls, and even the children dared not splash in puddles. Every pair of eyes seemed drawn to the river, as though it held the power to see into the hearts of all who gazed upon it. Chief Okiri paced inside his compound, every step heavy with tension. His face, usually calm and commanding, was lined with panic. He had been a man who controlled the village with words and fear, but now his authority had been undermined by a single act, a slap. The slap that revealed what he had long tried to bury. Adanna did not stay in her father's compound. She moved through the village like a shadow with purpose, her eyes sharp, her ears alert. Even the wind seemed to part for her. Villagers whispered as she passed, some with fear, some with awe. "What is she going to do?" a young mother asked, clutching her child. "She has awakened something," an elder replied gravely. "Something older than our stories, older than the village itself." Adanna stopped at the edge of a narrow path leading to the old shrine hidden in the forest. This was a place few dared to visit, a place the elders had always called sacred and dangerous. The shrine, overgrown with vines and roots, held relics of ancestors who demanded respect and sacrifice. It was here she felt the pulse of the land, the quiet anger of the spirits. She knelt before the shrine, placing her hands on the worn stones. The whispers started then, soft, murmuring, yet insistent. They spoke of betrayal, of promises broken, of women silenced and children forgotten. Adanna's heart ached as she listened. The spirits were angry not just at her father, but at every soul in Umudiala who had turned a blind eye to wrongdoing. A sudden rustle behind her made her stand. Mama Neka emerged from the shadows, leaning heavily on her staff. Her blind eyes seemed to pierce through Adanna, yet there was understanding there too. "You have done what others feared," the seer said, "but the journey has just begun. The ancestors demand more than defiance. They demand revelation, and the village is not
her resolve
ready."
hardening. She knew the truth she carried was dangerous, capable of shattering more than her father's pride. But it was the truth, and it needed to be heard. Back in the village, Chief Okori watched from his veranda as the crowd murmured at the river, fear and curiosity mixing in their eyes. He realized that the slap had unleashed a force he could neither fight nor control. And deep in the shrine, the ancestors stirred. The land had begun to whisper, and Umudiala would never be the same. By midday, the village of Umudiala had descended into a tense stillness. Traders abandoned their stalls, goats wandered unclaimed, and even the children huddled close to their mothers. The Black River had become more than a warning. It had become a mirror, reflecting every fear, every lie, every unspoken sin of the villagers. Yet no one dared speak too loudly, for the slap that Adanna had delivered lingered in the air like a curse, and every eye seemed to watch for her next move. Chief Okori sat inside his compound, rubbing his temples. He had sent messengers to neighboring villages for advice, but no one had dared to respond. The elders whispered among themselves, fearful of angering both the girl and the spirits that had clearly been awakened. And somewhere beneath the surface, an unspoken truth gnawed at him, one that had lain buried for decades, waiting for the moment it would explode. Adanna, meanwhile, moved quietly through the village paths toward the old marketplace, a place now abandoned and overgrown with weeds. Her heart pounded, but it was not fear, it was determination. She knew the first step toward restoring the balance was to confront the lies that had been hidden beneath layers of respect, fear, and silence. At the center of the marketplace, partially buried under mud from the heavy rain, she discovered what she had been searching for: fragments of a ledger, brittle and stained with age. It belonged to her father. Within its pages were names, amounts, and dates, records of debts, betrayals, and secret arrangements that had enriched Chief Okori while leaving the villagers in quiet suffering. The ledger revealed long-forgotten thefts of food, misappropriation of funds meant for the river shrine, and the deliberate silencing of women who dared to speak. Her hands shook as she read, realizing the magnitude of what she now held. This was more than evidence, it was the proof that her slap had been justified. And as she lifted her eyes toward the village, she saw faces peeking from behind doors and windows, villagers daring to watch the confrontation unfold. She clutched the ledger to her chest. "The truth cannot stay buried," she whispered. From behind her, a shadow moved. Mama Neka appeared silently, as if she had been there all along. "They will resist, and your father, he will try to stop you, but you have awakened the ancestors. The land itself demands justice, and it will not rest until it is served." Adanna nodded, her resolve burning in her eyes. She knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but one thing was clear: the secrets beneath the mud would rise no matter the cost. And in the village square, the air grew heavier with anticipation. Something old, powerful, and relentless had begun stirring, and it would not stop until every truth was revealed. By late afternoon, the villagers had gathered once more, drawn by the tension that clung to the air like a storm about to break. News of Adanna's discovery had spread like wildfire. Even those who had once dismissed her as merely defiant now stood with wary respect, watching as she walked into the village square, the old ledger clutched tightly to her chest. Her eyes were fierce, unflinching, and her presence commanded attention without a word. Chief Okori emerged from his compound, his usual pride battling with unease. He had faced storms, disputes, and even threats from neighboring villages, but never had he felt this cold, creeping fear settle into his bones. He approached his daughter, each step deliberate, trying to assert authority, but the villagers' eyes no longer followed him with blind obedience. They followed her. "You dare come here with lies and accusations?" he demanded, his voice booming. Adanna held the ledger aloft. "These are not lies, father. These are your deeds. The village has suffered in silence while you enriched yourself and silenced those who dared to speak. Today the truth will be heard." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Women covered their mouths in shock. Men exchanged uneasy glances. The elders shifted in their seats under the okbukba tree, some murmuring prayers, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Chief Okori's face darkened. "This is disrespect. You will kneel and apologize to me, or you will face the consequences of dishonoring your father before the ancestors." Adanna's gaze never wavered. "I will not kneel to lies. I will kneel only to the truth." She opened the ledger and began reading aloud, each word striking like a hammer against the walls of silence. Names, dates, stolen funds, broken promises. The villagers listened in horror as the magnitude of the deception unfolded before them.
The sky above seemed to darken, clouds swirling unnaturally. The wind picked up, lifting dust and leaves, as if the very air had become alive. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble echoed, the river, perhaps, or something older responding to the unmasking of deceit. Chief Okori took a step toward her, anger boiling into desperation. "Do you not understand what you are doing? You shame me before the village, before the ancestors." Adanna stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp. "No, father, you have shamed yourself, and the ancestors are here to witness the truth." The villagers held their breath as a ripple of realization spread. The power that once belonged solely to the chief had shifted. The balance of fear and respect had tipped, and a young daughter, who had dared to slap her father, now held the village's attention entirely. Mama Neka stepped forward from the shadows, her blind eyes seeming to see through every heart. "The land speaks, Chief Okori. Will you listen, or will you let silence destroy you?" For the first time in decades, the chief's voice faltered, and the village waited, knowing that the next move would either save them or shatter their world forever. The village square held a tense stillness, broken only by the low whisper of the wind through the trees and the distant, eerie gurgle of the Idemili River. Chief Okori's chest rose and fell rapidly, but his usual commanding presence was gone, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Every villager could feel it, something far older than any human authority had awakened. Adanna closed the ledger and lifted her head. Her eyes, dark and determined, scanned the crowd. She did not see only her father. She saw every villager, every life intertwined with the lies that had festered in silence. "The river," she said, pointing toward the black waters, "was not angry by chance. It reflects the corruption that has poisoned this village for generations." The crowd stirred uneasily. The elders exchanged glances, their faces pale and drawn. Some had suspected the chief of misdeeds, but none had imagined the truth could be so widespread, so deep. Chief Okori's voice broke the uneasy silence. "Enough! You dare accuse me before the spirits and the people of Umudiala? You are my daughter, and I—" A sharp, rolling clap of thunder cut through his words. The sky darkened suddenly, faster than any ordinary storm. Lightning streaked across the horizon, illuminating the villagers' terrified faces in brilliant white flashes. Even the seasoned elders could not deny the feeling. The ancestors had arrived. Mama Neka lifted her staff and spoke in a voice both trembling and commanding. "Silence has been broken, lies have been revealed. The spirits of our ancestors will now speak, and none shall ignore their words." Then, as if in response, a low rumbling voice rolled across the river. It was not thunder, nor wind, but something alive. A collective shiver passed through the villagers as the waters of the Idemili rose slightly, swirling unnaturally, reflecting not the sun, but shadowed faces, faces of women, children, and elders long gone. The voice continued, deep and resonant. "Those who hide truth in fear will face the judgment of the land. Those who silence the cries of the innocent will see their wealth and pride wither. Only honesty, bravery, and restitution may cleanse the village."
Seemed to pause, holding its breath as if awaiting the chief's next move. He looked at his daughter, his heir in courage, his nemesis in truth, and for the first time he understood that the balance of power had shifted forever. The ancestors had spoken, and Umudiala could no longer pretend that the past was buried. The following morning, Umudiala felt different. Even before the sun rose, the air was charged with an energy that could not be ignored.
villagers emerged from their compounds cautiously, eyes drawn to the river whose black waters now glistened with an almost sentient sheen. Children clung to their mothers, and even the elders moved with unusual urgency, whispering prayers to the ancestors who had clearly awoken. Adanna walked through the village, her presence no longer questioned or feared. The ledger remained in her hands, now a symbol not of accusation alone, but of revelation and justice. Her every step seemed to ripple through the earth, stirring whispers in the wind and tremors beneath her feet. She had become the bridge between the village and the truth long suppressed. Chief Okori stayed in his compound, staring at the walls that had once protected him with authority and pride. He was a man stripped bare by a single act of defiance, by a slap that had forced hidden sins into the light. His mind raced. The river, the ancestors, the villagers, they all demanded restitution, and he could no longer ignore the consequences. At the riverbank, the villagers had gathered once more. The black water shimmered strangely, reflecting not only the sky, but hints of the past, crops failing, children falling ill, women crying in silence. It was as if the river itself remembered every injustice. Mothers pointed to it, whispering to one another about what had been lost and what might be restored. Adanna raised her voice, firm but clear. "Look at the river! Look at what silence has done! Every hidden lie, every stolen harvest, every secret that was forced into shadows, it all rises to the surface. We cannot hide from it any longer." An elder stepped forward, trembling. "We have ignored too much for too long, but now it is time to act. We must correct what has been broken." Chief Okori emerged slowly, holding his head high, despite the shame etched across his face. He approached his daughter, his voice subdued. "Adanna, I have failed this village. I have failed you. Tell me, what must I do to restore balance?" Adanna looked at him, eyes burning with a mixture of grief and determination. "You must return everything stolen. You must admit the truth to the people. You must make the river whole again." The villagers watched in awe as the chief knelt beside the river, following the instructions whispered by Mama Neka as Adanna guided him. Together they began the rituals of confession and restitution, offerings of food, seeds, and prayers to the ancestors. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the river began to clear. Its blackness faded, revealing the glimmering silver beneath, a sign that the village's suffering might finally be lifted. But even as the water cleared, a deeper reckoning loomed. Secrets had been revealed, yes, but the cost of silence had not yet been fully paid. As the river shimmered back to life, a fragile sense of hope spread through Umudiala. The villagers murmured prayers of gratitude, mothers lifted children toward the sky, and elders exchanged glances heavy with relief and awe. Yet amidst this fragile calm, Adanna knew the truth was not fully revealed. The ledger she carried had one final secret, one that even Chief Okori had never anticipated. She returned to the old shrine, the worn stones damp with morning dew, and opened the ledger once more. Among the entries detailing stolen crops and misappropriated funds, she found a series of notes hidden between pages, a list of names, dates, and unmarked symbols. Her heart raced as she realized these were not mere financial records. These were the names of villagers who had disappeared mysteriously over the past decades. Children, young men, women, all vanished quietly, forgotten by most, their fates concealed under the weight of silence and fear. Mama Neka, who had followed her silently, gasped. "These are the forgotten," the seer said, "the ones whose the ancestors demand justice for. They were silenced, and their cries have reached the river, the wind, and the earth. You must reveal them, Adanna, or their spirits will never rest." Adanna's hands shook as she closed the ledger and stepped back into the village square. She raised her voice so that every ear could hear. "People of Umudiala, the ledger holds more than theft or betrayal. It holds the names of those who were taken in silence. These lives cannot be forgotten any longer. The ancestors demand that we remember and restore their honor." A ripple of shock moved through the villagers. Faces paled, and some sank to their knees, overwhelmed by the weight of hidden horrors. Chief Okori's face was ashen. He had known of some of these disappearances, but had kept them secret, hoping they would never resurface. And now, with Adanna's courage exposing them, the full magnitude of his failures and the village's complicity stood undeniable. "Father," Adanna said, her voice steady yet filled with sorrow, "we must face this together. Confess, honor the missing, and restore the balance that has been broken for generations. Only then can Umudiala truly heal." Okori lowered his head, his pride shattered, but his spirit awakened. I will do as you say," he admitted. "I will reveal all, make restitution, and honor those who were lost." Mama Neka nodded approvingly. "The ancestors are listening. But remember, child, the path to balance is not simple. There are still trials ahead. This village has awakened, and the reckoning has only begun." Adanna clenched the ledger to her chest, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the surge of power that came with truth. Umudiala had changed forever. And somewhere, in the shadows of the riverbank and the forests beyond, the spirits of the forgotten stirred, ready to witness the village's next steps. That evening, Umudiala was cloaked in an eerie silence, unlike any the villagers had ever known. The river gleamed under the silver light of the rising moon, calm yet brimming with unspoken menace. Families huddled in their compounds, and even the most skeptical elders felt a shiver crawl along their spines. They knew the ledger's revelations were only the beginning. Adanna moved through the village with deliberate calm. The villagers parted instinctively as she passed, sensing that she carried not just truth, but the weight of the ancestors themselves. She could feel their gaze, invisible but pressing, guiding her steps, urging her to confront the darkness that had lingered in every shadow of Umudiala. Chief Okori had gathered the elders beneath the okpagu tree, but the usual aura of authority was gone from him. He had confessed, admitted the misdeeds recorded in the ledger, and offered restitution. Yet the river and the forest whispered, but confession alone would not suffice. Something deeper demanded atonement, a confrontation that would unearth the village's hidden sins fully. Adava climbed onto a raised platform of carved stone near the riverbank. The villagers gathered hesitantly, holding torches that flickered with the wind. Mama Neka appeared at her side, leaning heavily on her staff. Her blind eyes glimmered with a strange light, as though she could see the souls of everyone present. Tonight, the ancestors demand justice, not only from the guilty, but from all who allowed silence to thrive. Those who hid the truth, who ignored the cries of the innocent, must face their deeds. The river has heard, the forest has heard, and we will no longer turn away. Adanna opened the ledger one final time. "These maims," she said, her voice steady and unwavering, "represent lives stolen in darkness. The people who disappeared, the secrets buried, the injustices ignored, each one calls to us now. We must confront them,
The
speak
villagers
their
nodded
names,
slowly,
and
their
honor
fear giving way to resolve. For the first time, Umudiala felt the weight of truth and the possibility of redemption. The following morning, the village awoke to a fragile, almost surreal calm. The air, once heavy with fear, now carried a sense of cautious anticipation. Birds chirped tentatively, and the sun cut through lingering mist, illuminating the Idamili River in shimmering silver. Its waters, once black and foreboding, now flowed gently, reflecting the first steps of balance returning to Umudiala. Adanna walked along the riverbank, her steps deliberate, the ledger pressed tightly to her chest. She had not slept. Her mind swirled with the weight of the revelations, the reactions of the villagers, and the looming sense that the night's reckoning was only the beginning. Yet, for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Chief Okori followed, his robes damp with morning dew, his face drawn with exhaustion and reflection. He moved slowly, humbled by the previous night's confessions and the sheer power of the truth that Adanna had wielded. Though he had been a man of authority and fear, he now walked as one who understood the magnitude of what silence and deception could do, not just to himself, but to the entire village. "Adanna," he said quietly, "you have done what I could not. The village, we owe you more than we realize. But what comes next?" She looked at him steadily. "Next comes action, Father. The ledger showed us the past, but restoring balance requires more than confession. We must repair what was broken, honor the missing, and ensure the river, the land, and the ancestors know that justice is no longer delayed." Across the village, villagers began to gather, some hesitantly, some with renewed courage. The elders called for collective work, cleaning the riverbanks, repairing damaged fields, and preparing offerings for the lost and the ancestors. Even the women who had whispered in fear the previous days now joined in, their hands strong and determined. Mama Neka appeared beside Adanna once more, her staff tapping softly against the stones. "The ancestors are watching. They will not interfere where the living take responsibility, but this is only the first step. There are still hidden truths, darker than you know, waiting to surface." Adanna nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility deepen. She had sparked change, but the ledger still held one final secret, one that could shake Umudiala more violently than even the Black River had. As the villagers worked, the wind carried a faint, eerie whisper from the forest. It was a reminder: balance required courage, vigilance, and the bravery to confront even the darkest truths. And somewhere beneath the river, unseen but present, the ancestors stirred again, watching, waiting, and silently judging. The sun had barely risen when Adanna returned to the shrine, the morning mist curling around her feet like a shroud. She had spent the previous day overseeing the villagers' efforts to cleanse the river and repair the farms, but her mind was elsewhere. The ledger's final pages had remained untouched, mysterious and foreboding. She knew that what lay hidden could either cement Umudiala's salvation or plunge it back into darkness. Mama Neka followed silently, leaning on her staff. The blind seer's presence carried weight, a subtle warning of the dangers that lurked in truth. "The ledger is not merely a record of misdeeds," she said quietly. "Its last pages contain a secret that even your father feared. The ancestors will guide you, but you must be prepared."
Adanna opened the ledger. The ink was faded, almost invisible in places, but she could make out the names and symbols. Unlike the earlier entries, these were not merely of villagers' disappearances or stolen wealth. They spoke of a curse older than memory, tied to the chief's bloodline. Each symbol represented a ritual, a pact with forces that demanded secrecy, obedience, and silence. And somewhere in these hidden rites was a detail so damning that it threatened not only the village, but the lineage of Chief Akori himself. Her hands trembled as she read aloud, despite Mama Neka's urging her to remain calm. "The curse, it is tied to the ancestors' silence," she whispered. "Every wrong hidden, every injustice ignored, strengthens it, and now it is ready to rise unless it is broken properly." Mama Neka's voice was sharp, urgent. "The ancestors demand acknowledgement, not just confession. The pact your father upheld in fear of power has poisoned generations. To break it, you must gather the village and confront the spirits openly, fearlessly. Only then will the curse be undone." Adanna closed the ledger, determination blazing in her eyes. She turned to the forest, to the river, to the village itself. "I will gather them," she said. "We will face this together, or the village will never know peace." By mid-morning, the villagers had assembled, curiosity and fear etched into every face. Adanna stood in the center, the ledger clutched tightly in her hands, while Mama Neka leaned against her staff at the edge of the crowd, her blind eyes seeming to pierce the very veil between the living and the ancestors. Chief Akori, once commanding and proud, now looked smaller than any child in the crowd. His robes hung heavy, and his hands trembled. The weight of his past, the secrecy, the hidden pacts, the fear of the ancestors had finally caught up to him. He had confessed, he had offered restitution, but the ledger's final revelation was more than confession could undo. It demanded courage, unity, and sacrifice. Adanna raised her voice. "This village has endured centuries of silence. The curse has grown in the shadows of our fear and lies. Today we face it. Every hidden truth, every injustice ignored, every pact sealed in fear will be brought into the open." As she spoke, a sudden gust of wind swept through the square, whipping leaves, dust, and even small stones into the air. The river surged violently, sending splashes towards the villagers. A deep, low rumble emanated from beneath the earth itself, shaking huts and throwing torches into the dirt. The crowd gasped as shapes began to form in the rippling black waters. Shadowy figures, faces twisted with pain and sorrow, rose momentarily before dissolving back into the depths. The villagers realized that these were the spirits of those whose lives had been lost, silenced, or forgotten, victims of the village's past and the chief's hidden pacts. Mama Neka raised her staff. "The ancestors demand acknowledgement. You must speak their names, confess your part, and call for forgiveness, or the curse will consume more than the river. It will consume the village itself." Adanna stepped forward, holding the ledger aloft. "We will speak the names, we will confess, we will honor those lost, and we will break this curse together." One by one, villagers began to speak, mothers, fathers, elders, even children. Names were called, stories revealed, and apologies offered. The river responded, rippling and calming slightly with each confession. Chief Akori finally fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I failed you all. I failed the ancestors. Please forgive me." As the final name was spoken, the river shimmered and cleared further. The shadows faded, and the oppressive rumble of the earth quieted. Yet in the air lingered a palpable warning. Umudiala's reckoning was far from over. By evening, a heavy stillness settled over Umudiala. The confessions along the river had eased the immediate anger of the ancestors, but the villagers knew the curse had deeper roots, treads of fear and hidden betrayal still winding through the village like dark rivers beneath the soil. Mama Neka stood at the riverbank, her staff planted firmly, and spoke with authority. "The ancestors have heard your words," she said, her voice ringing over the gathering. "But hearing is not enough. They demand proof of courage, proof that the village will stand together against the darkness that lingered in silence. Tonight, the trial begins."
Holding the ledger tightly. "What must we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Mama Aneka's blind eyes seemed to pierce the river's shimmering surface. "Each person must confront their fear. One by one, you will walk through the fire of truth. Not just confession, but acknowledgement of every hidden deed that hurt another. Only when all have faced this trial will the curse be broken." The villagers exchanged frightened glances. A trial by fire was not literal, Mama Aneka explained, but spiritual, a journey into self-confrontation. Those who had lied, betrayed, or kept secrets had to step forward alone and speak not only to the ancestors, but to the river, to the forest, and to those they had wronged. Adanna went first. She approached the center of the riverbank, kneeling on the wet sand, and began reading the ledger aloud again. Every name, every act of concealment, every injustice was spoken clearly. Tears streamed down her face, not from fear, but from the weight of truth finally being acknowledged. One by one, the villagers followed. Some whispered confessions through trembling lips. Others shouted long-buried secrets into the wind. The river seemed to respond, ripples glowing faintly, as if each admission fed a healing force through the land. Shadows of the past, the lost, the silenced, and the wronged appeared faintly in the waters, nodding, acknowledging, then fading. Chief Okore's time came last. He fell to his knees, head bowed, voice cracking as he recounted every deception, every pact made in fear, every injustice hidden behind authority. "I have failed this village," he said. "I have failed the ancestors. Forgive me." The river shimmered violently, then stilled. A gentle breeze swept through the square, lifting dust, leaves, and a sense of release. The trial had begun to purify the village, yet the air held a quiet warning. The ancestors' judgment was thorough, and Umudiala had only survived the first stage. Adanna looked at the villagers, her eyes fierce yet calm. "We have begun," she said, "but the true test, the reckoning of our deepest sins, is still ahead." The following night, the village of Umudiala slept fitfully, the air heavy with expectation. The river, now flowing clear and bright under the moonlight, carried a strange hum, a vibration felt deep in the bones of every villager. Shadows moved oddly along the huts and pathways, stretching and flickering as if alive. The ancestors were stirring again, and this time their demands were more personal, more intimate. Adanna woke before dawn, feeling a pull toward the forest beyond the village. The ledger, now worn and damp from countless hands, seemed to pulse with energy. Mama Aneka appeared silently at her side, her staff tapping against the stone path. "The trial continues," the seer whispered. "The ancestors demand not just confession, but reckoning with what has been hidden in your own hearts. Fear, jealousy, pride, and hatred must be faced."
Adanna nodded. She understood. The first wave of confession at the river had cleansed the village's surface, but beneath it, deeper sins lurked. Acts of selfishness, betrayals of trust, unspoken resentments that had festered for generations. The ledger held clues, fragments of secrets that no one had dared speak aloud. The villagers gathered at the edge of the forest, shivering in the cool night air. Mama Aneka raised her staff, and a soft chant began to rise from the trees, carried on the wind. The shadows around the villagers deepened, growing longer, merging with the shapes of ancestors and spirits that seemed to drift just beyond sight. One by one, villagers stepped forward. Mothers spoke of lies told to protect themselves at the expense of others. Fathers admitted misdeeds done in anger or pride. Children recounted secrets that had burdened them for years. Each confession was met with a ripple through the forest, leaves shaking, and a faint glow rising from the earth as if the land itself absorbed the truth. Chief Okore's turn came last. His hands trembled as he lifted the ledger, reading aloud the most damning secrets hidden even from the first confessions. Tales of cruelty, manipulation, and fear-driven choices poured into the night. With every word, the forest seemed to lean closer, listening, absorbing, judging. When he finished, silence fell. The wind died, the shadows stilled, and the forest seemed to exhale. The ancestors' presence was palpable, but less threatening now, as if the village had begun to prove itself worthy of mercy. Adanna stepped forward, lifting the ledger. "This is not the end," she said, her voice carrying over the hushed crowd, "but it is a beginning. We have faced the shadows, and now we must continue to honor the truth." The villagers nodded, their faces pale but resolute. They had glimpsed the depth of their collective guilt, yet for the first time they felt a strange flicker of hope, the possibility that Umudiala could finally heal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Umudiala held its collective breath. The village, once bustling with simple routines, now stood transformed, quiet, watchful, and tense. The river, now partially restored, reflected the blood-red light of dusk, as if warning that the final trial had begun. The villagers knew that confession and acknowledgement had been only steps. What awaited them was far deeper, a test that would reach into the very soul of Umudiala. Adanna stood at the riverbank, the ledger clutched firmly in her hands. Her eyes swept over the villagers gathered before her, elders, children, mothers, fathers, all marked by exhaustion, fear, and anticipation. Mama Aneka appeared beside her, staff tapping lightly on the stones, her voice carrying authority and warning. "The ancestors have seen your confessions. They have listened, but they demand more. The final test is one of courage, unity, and sacrifice. Every person must confront what lies within, and the village must act as one. Only together can the remaining darkness be banished." A sudden chill swept through the square. The river surged violently, spilling water onto the banks, and shadowy figures appeared briefly along its surface, faces twisted with sorrow, anger, and accusation. The villagers gasped, realizing that these were not mere reflections, but manifestations of the remaining spirits whose grievances had not yet been fully addressed. Adanna stepped forward, raising the ledger high. "We have spoken the names, confessed our sins, and acknowledged our failures. Now we must act. Each of us must offer what we can to restore balance. We must show the ancestors that we are worthy of mercy." One by one, villagers stepped forward. Some offered gifts to the river, food, woven baskets, seeds for the land. Others brought personal tokens, items that symbolized past betrayals, guilt, or loss. Each offering was accompanied by words of acknowledgement and promises to uphold truth and justice in the future. Chief Okore came last, his hands trembling as he lifted a ceremonial knife that had once been used to seal dark pacts. He pierced the earth gently, blood mingling with the soil. "I offer my life of pride and secrecy," he declared. "I renounce the lies of the past and pledge to serve the village and the ancestors faithfully." A powerful wind tore through the village, whipping leaves, scattering ashes from torches, and lifting the waters of the river. Then, slowly, the river stilled. The shadows faded, replaced by a serene silver glow. The final test had been passed. Adanna lowered the ledger, relief washing over her. "It is done," she said softly. "The village has faced the darkness, and now we can rebuild not just the land, but ourselves." The villagers exhaled collectively, their fear transforming into awe. For the first time in generations, Umudiala felt a sense of peace, and the ancestors seemed to approve. The dawn that followed the final test brought with it a calm that Umudiala had not known in decades. Birds sang hesitantly at first, then with increasing confidence. The river sparkled
I
like
could
liquid
not,
silver.
he said quietly. You have led this village through fear, shame, and darkness. I owe you more than words can say. Adanna's expression softened. We all did this together, she said. The village, the elders, even you, Father. But this is only the beginning. The land, the river, and the ancestors will watch us. We must continue to honor the truth, or Umudiala may fall into darkness again. Mama Aneka stepped forward, raising her staff. The ancestors are pleased, she announced. The curse has been broken, the lost honored, and balance restored. But remember, the strength of a village lies not only in its confessions, but in the courage to uphold justice and truth every day. The villagers began practical work immediately. Fields once neglected were tilled and replanted. The riverbanks were strengthened, and sacred offerings were made to honor those who had been lost. The air felt lighter, and even the houses seemed to breathe easier, as if acknowledging the cleansing that had passed over them. Adanna looked toward the horizon, the wind tugging at her braids. She realized that her act, the slap that had shocked the village, had been the spark, but it was unity, courage, and honesty that had healed it. Umudiala was no longer a village of silence and fear. It had become a village of truth and resilience. And somewhere, deep in the river and the forest, the ancestors watched, silent and approving, their presence a gentle reminder of the power of courage and truth. Weeks had passed since the night of the final trial, and Umudiana was slowly returning to life, but not as it had been. There was a new rhythm to the village, one shaped by truth, accountability, and a shared understanding that silence had once been deadly. Children ran freely along the riverbanks, their laughter mingling with the gentle gurgle of the now pure Idemili. Women worked in the fields with renewed energy, while elders moved with purpose, passing down lessons learned from the painful days of reckoning. Adanna walked through the village square, her presence commanding respect, but no longer fear. She had become more than a daughter, more than a voice of defiance. She had become a symbol of courage. Her single act, the slap that had shocked the entire village, had set in motion a series of events that none could ignore. Yet she carried no pride, only responsibility.
Chief Okori, transformed by the trials, worked alongside the villagers. His leadership had changed, shifting from control through fear to guidance through accountability. He had learned that true respect came not from authority, but from honesty and care. He often watched Adanna, admiration tempered with humility, realizing that the spark she had ignited was now sustaining the village. Mama Aneka appeared less frequently, yet her presence remained palpable. Her eyes, blind but sharp, watched over the village as the guardian of the ancestors' lessons. She would appear at moments of tension or doubt, offering wisdom that reminded the villagers of the power of truth and the cost of silence. Adanna gathered the children by the river one morning, the ledger resting nearby. "This river has seen our past," she said softly. "It has seen lies, hidden deeds, and pain, but it has also seen courage. Remember, silence may seem safe, but it can harm more than any action. Speak, act, and be brave, even when it is difficult." The children listened intently, their eyes wide with understanding. Even the youngest seemed to grasp that their world had changed, that courage and honesty were now woven into the very soil of Umudiala. As the sun rose, Adanna looked toward the horizon, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The village was not yet perfect, but it had been reborn. The ancestors had tested them, the curse had been broken, and Umudiala had emerged stronger, wiser, and united. And in every whisper of the wind, in every ripple of the river, the legacy of that one courageous slap continued to resonate, a reminder that even a single act of defiance could awaken generations. The morning sun bathed Umudiala in a golden light, glinting off the river that now flowed clear and vibrant, reflecting a village reborn. The air was alive with activity, but not in the chaotic, fearful way it once had been. Instead, it was a harmony of purpose. Children playing freely along the riverbanks, women carrying baskets of freshly harvested crops, elders moving with purpose, passing down lessons learned from the painful days of reckoning. Adanna walked through the village square, her presence commanding respect, but no longer fear. She had become more than a daughter, more than a voice of defiance. She had become a symbol of courage. Her single act, the slap that had shocked the entire village, had set in motion a series of events that none could ignore. Yet she carried no pride, only responsibility. Chief Okori, transformed by the trials, worked alongside the villagers. His leadership had changed, shifting from control through fear to guidance through accountability. He had learned that true respect came not from authority, but from honesty and care. He often watched Adanna, admiration tempered with humility, realizing that the spark she had ignited was now sustaining the village. Mama Aneka appeared less frequently, yet her presence remained palpable. Her eyes, blind but sharp, watched over the village as the guardian of the ancestors' lessons. She would appear at moments of tension or doubt, offering wisdom that reminded the villagers of the power of truth and the cost of silence. Adanna gathered the children by the river one morning, the ledger resting nearby. "This river has seen our past," she said softly. "It has seen lies, hidden deeds, and pain, but it has also seen courage. Remember, silence may seem safe, but it can harm more than any action. Speak, act, and be brave, even when it is difficult." The children listened intently, their eyes wide with understanding. Even the youngest seemed to grasp that their world had changed, that courage and honesty were now woven into the very soil of Umudiala. As the sun rose, Adanna looked toward the horizon, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The village was not yet perfect, but it had been reborn. The ancestors had tested them, the curse had been broken, and Umudiala had emerged stronger, wiser, and united. And in every whisper of the wind, in every ripple of the river, the legacy of that one courageous slap continued to resonate, a reminder that even a single act of defiance could awaken generations. The morning sun bathed Umudiala in a golden light, glinting off the river that now flowed clear and vibrant, reflecting a village reborn. The air was alive with activity, but not in the chaotic, fearful way it once had been. Instead, it was a harmony of purpose. Children playing freely along the riverbanks, women carrying baskets of freshly harvested crops, elders moving with purpose, passing down lessons learned from the painful days of reckoning. Adanna walked through the village square, her presence commanding respect, but no longer fear. She had become more than a daughter, more than a voice of defiance. She had become a symbol of courage. Her single act, the slap that had shocked the entire village, had set in motion a series of events that none could ignore. Yet she carried no pride, only responsibility. Chief Okori, transformed by the trials, worked alongside the villagers. His leadership had changed, shifting from control through fear to guidance through accountability. He had learned that true respect came not from authority, but from honesty and care. He often watched Adanna, admiration tempered with humility, realizing that the spark she had ignited was now sustaining the village. Mama Aneka appeared less frequently, yet her presence remained palpable. Her eyes, blind but sharp, watched over the village as the guardian of the ancestors' lessons. She would appear at moments of tension or doubt, offering wisdom that reminded the villagers of the power of truth and the cost of silence. Adanna gathered the children by the river one morning, the ledger resting nearby. "This river has seen our past," she said softly. "It has seen lies, hidden deeds, and pain, but it has also seen courage. Remember, silence may seem safe, but it can harm more than any act."